Hello, and welcome to part two with Luna. So, in this episode, Luna is going to be talking quite a bit about food, one of my favorite things for us to talk about. And she is an adventurous eater. So, hang on, listen to all that she has to say about eating, and then stick around at the end of the episode where I'm going to tell you a little bit more as the traveling teach about everyone's curiosity when it comes to eating overseas snails in France.
We've been talking and kind of skirting around the food stuff, which is like our
Oh,
favorite. Are you an adventurous eater?
very much so. Like wherever there is food, I will try it, and there's like very select few items I will not touch. But other than that, like I will eat anything. I am a garbage disposal. I will eat like anything you want me to, whether it's vegetable peelings or if it's just like something super random. I'll be like, yeah, sure, go on, I'll take it.
What's on your
But
short list of I will not try this?
for me, organs. I cannot get myself to like knowingly eat internal organs. It's just not something that I can bring myself to do. I don't want to eat stomach lining. I don't want to eat intestines. It's just not something that like I can wrap my head around enough, and they don't taste that great. Like they're just not my thing. Not my cup of tea.
Okay.
I don't like anything that's made with blood, like blood sausage and stuff. Not something I could bring myself to try. Um, One thing that I have tried that I just do not like is eggplant. I hate egg. Like hate the texture and I hate the taste. I hate everything about it. It's just not good. Not my thing.
So, what is the
My
best or worst or most memorable thing that you've tried on your travels? Like when you think of like, I am so brave because I ate that, what is it?
oh, there's been like a lot of things like that. I think like the main like memory from having something that like I would never try again, but I'm like, dang, like I have that forever now, and I can say that I ate this. Um, was actually also in Asia. We were in Hong Kong, I think. And it was kind of like after like a really long travel day, and we had just gotten to this hotel, and everyone was like exhausted, and we were like, hey, let's order some food. But the whole menu is in Chinese, so we don't actually know what we're ordering. We're like, hey, that picture looks good. So we're just kind of like selecting things, looking for things to eat, and we end up ordering some soup. Now, I am a lover of soup. Soup is like if there was one food that I like had to choose like for the rest of my life, it would be like just soup in general. Um, I don't know why I am so intrigued by it, but it is my everything. Okay. Um, so we get this, and I'm like, I'm so excited. I am so hungry. I'm tired, and I just need to eat this now. Um, and I also, it's soup is something that's always really fun to try in other countries too, because it's like just so many different textures and flavors and stuff, and different like um, naturally like occurring like traditional vegetables and meats and such. So I always love that. But this soup had some of my short list of canceled like things that I will not eat. And I did not know that. And so like I smelled it and I was like, okay, it's just soup. And we take a couple bites and I'm like, what is that? Because it does not taste like something that I have ever tasted before, and I'm not a fan. I don't know if I will keep eating this or not. And I'm like, does this soup taste weird to you guys? And they're like, yeah, it's a little strange. Like it just doesn't taste right. And I'm like, huh, what's that? So I poke around in my soup a little bit, and I'm like, that would be a small cutting of intestine in my soup. And I'm like, guys, there's intestines in this soup. And they were like, oh, that that is that is a thing. Ah. So I think that was the first time that I really like come face to face with any like internal organs from any animal. And I would not do it again, but it did happen at some point. So like it's a story that I can tell now and be like, yeah, I did that.
So, what is the tastiest thing you've ever tried? I know it'll be hard to pick, But what's something that you go, that was delicious, and I would go back to that place and eat it again and again?
Oh my gosh. I would say that's actually hard, but at the same time, it's not because there's like, I think for like most travelers, there's like that one thing that you tried that like has stuck in your mind forever and you just constantly crave it. And you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, I need that in my life so bad again. I think the main thing for me was we don't know what they're called. They're just these like pastries, and we were at a water park and it was just me and my mom, and we were like, oh, we're so hungry. And it was in Budapest, I think. So we're like on this like island in the middle that's kind of known for being like a little like amusement like area, and you take a short boat to it. And it was really beautiful and stuff, and we were like, oh my god, we're hungry. So we go to like the food stands, and they have these little like donut pastry things, and they're not really donuts, they're like flat and they're bigger, and they have savory ones and they have like sweet ones. So we get these like powdered sugar ones, and we get one to split because they're like massive, and they have this like flaky but also like kind of chewy like donut texture, like a really good like fried donut, but they're flat, and I was like, that looks really good and it smells amazing. And to this day, we still have no idea what they were because we didn't speak the language, so I didn't know like exactly what that was. But that was like the most amazing thing I've ever had in my life. Okay, that was like these pastry things. Like they just had a bunch of powdered sugar on them, and they were like just absolute like, my lord. If I would do so many things to get that back, that one taste, like one bite. And I wish I knew what they were so I could have like I could get other people addicted to them, but no.
Yeah, I asked this question and I am kind of unfair because I would have a really hard time picking two. I am an adventurous eater. I have eaten sea slug, and it was not terrible. It tastes like salty jello.
Yeah.
Regular listeners to the podcast will know that my next food adventure is going, well, unless something happens on this trip that I don't know about. This next food adventure is going to be here in Denver, actually. We are going to have Rocky Mountain oysters.
Oh.
Are you familiar with those?
I am not.
They are bull testicles.
Oh.
So I am going to try those while we are here in Denver. And I'm going to do a video of it for my students because I also teach on the road. And so I'm going to do a little video for it. So I'll make sure I send that video to your mom too. So you can see. But surprisingly, like we had Dunkin' Donuts in Thailand because we were like, let's try the different flavors. They had like a blueberry powdered sugar donut in Thailand that I've never had anywhere else. That was amazing. Gelato in Italy, of course, is like, you just got to have it. I love a cooked English breakfast in England. Yeah, there's all these like different little things. Oxtail soup in Jamaica was amazing. So, you know, there's all these different things depending on where you're at. I think our most kind of like, oh, story is we were in Rwanda. Love Rwanda. If you ever get the chance to go there and you haven't been there already, it's a beautiful country. We were in Rwanda and we went to have dinner, and we had been ordering goat a lot. We'd had goat the whole time we were there. And we had been heading over to the hotel's like dining area, and we didn't think anything of the fact that there was a goat outside the kitchen. It just didn't click. Like, even though we know where goat comes from, like we just didn't really. So we sit down and we order, and our meal takes an hour and a half to come. We were kind of starting to be like, oh my gosh, okay. Like, we understand that there's different times and different speeds of service and things, but we'd been eating at this restaurant at our like hotel on the lake for like a while. It's owned by a local Rwandan woman and it's amazing. And yeah, we ate, we walked back by the kitchen, no goat. So then we went, oh, that's why it took so long. So I was like, oh, we do not speak of goat. Like, this is like, oh no, like from Ferdinand the Bull. We do not speak of
I'll
Tracy.
never think of this.
We do not speak of goat. It didn't stop us from continuing to eat goat. But yeah, we were very much like, oh, okay. Sorry, goat, for complaining during your sacrifice for us. So yeah, crazy, crazy food stories. They're so fun. Is there anything that causes you kind of a little bit of fear or anxiety? Maybe, I mean, because you do this a lot, so maybe there's not, but I'm sure there's got to be something that it's either not your favorite or it's something that causes you fear or anxiety. And when that happens, how do you deal with it?
There or freak me out. Whether we're traveling or if we're just out and about where we usually are. Like I've always been that way. Like there's always had very severe anxiety over very small things. And I think for me, like the biggest things with traveling are planes. Like air travel has always been very stressful for me. I do not like it, and if I can avoid it, I will do everything in my power to do so. But when you travel internationally, there's not much you can do about that. So air travel is a big one for me. Not speaking the language does cause a lot of anxiety, especially when it comes to like communicating with people in the moment. Even when we're in the U.S. and I do speak the language, actually like ordering food or like purchasing something and like having to speak to the cashier for a little bit, like it causes a lot of very severe anxiety because I feel like I'm on the spot and I'm like it's very like it's stressful for me. But especially when you don't speak the language, it's a little bit like nerve-wracking. So it's usually smaller things like that for me. And my main coping strategy, I wouldn't really call it coping, but for me, it's always been music that has always like soothed those nerves. And for a while, I was kind of told like music is a band-aid. If you are stressed out, do not use music because it's not a real coping strategy. It's just like, something that's there and you might not always have it. So it's not something to rely on. And I tried that for a while, but other coping strategies never really worked for me. So it's always been like my go-to. And even though it's a band-aid, I like my band-aid. Thank you very much. So I will continue to keep using my band-aid. And so that's my main strategy most of the time.
Oh, I love that. So I am with you. I do not like to fly, but I must do it if I want to go the places. So I have many things. A few episodes ago, I did a thing about flying and included kind of like my tips for flying and an app that I use to help me. The app actually has a little panic button on it. And so when you feel really anxious, you press the little button and they walk you through like a guided meditation and like a guided calming thing and stuff. So like if whatever you're normally doing is not working, you do this like little thing and it says, so you feel afraid, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and then it's like, put your hand on your belly, blah, blah, blah. And so it talks to you and kind of like calms you down. It's the same thing every time, but it's very soothing for me to be able to know that if I'm feeling especially anxious, I can kind of press that little panic button and it helps. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. And I also am someone who I struggle with my anxiety disorder. Some days it's great and some days it's really not great. And so I completely appreciate it. So much so that I actually have a tattoo now about fear and anxiety because I was like, this is so important. I need to like ingrain this literally on my body. And it says, fear doesn't prevent death, it prevents life. So I try really hard to work through my fear, work with my fear. There are still things I say no to. I hate heights. So there's still a lot of things I'll say no to, but overall, I try to work with it rather than against it and try and make it work with me instead of avoiding it because I want to go do all the things. So for sure. All right. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time together, but what is something that you want parents or teachers to know when they're planning a trip with or for teens or tweens?
I think it's a really important one. Like, it really depends on the kid. Like, everyone is very different, and especially when you are working with teens and tweens, um, there is very specific needs that everyone has, and things that they need to have with them, or sometimes coping strategies and things like that. especially for kids with anxiety and stuff. So it's really important to know the children you are working with, because like you need to know exactly what they're going to need and what works for them, and things that they're going to have to take with them to be comfortable, and actually try to have fun when they are traveling. That is something that I've always had to like ask to pay attention to, because I know that there's things that I need to have like a good time when I'm going places. So that's always something that's really important to me. Like the few things that I do need with me to be comfortable, especially because I'm someone that takes a long time to adjust. Like I need a very like long period of time to like really like get comfortable in a place. So I think know the people that you're working with is always really important. And I think if the people that you're working with are the kind of kids that need to like have input on stuff, trying to be flexible with like um the kids and stuff like that, and like knowing if they like to kind of um like choose places and stuff like that, they're going to stay, go to cities, like plan mini trips and things. That's always really important. Um, but I think it really just depends on who you're working with and what they're comfortable with.
And your final question. Some teen or tween has come across this podcast and they're not too sure if travel is for them. What would you say to them to encourage them?
For me, like I just kind of had to put myself out there and like really try to get used to it. And eventually I was like, okay, this is something I like. But it's not for everyone. I'll be honest. It's a specific taste that you have to have for, up and going all the time, and sometimes maybe not having like a house to go back to and just kind of like constantly traveling. Like it's not for everyone. But it's something that you just really have to like put yourself out there to do, and like if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, then you don't, and that's okay. Like
I love it. You've been so wonderful to talk to, Luna. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Of course, I really enjoyed my time here.
So you are back with me, Shae Pepper, the traveling teach. So that was a really great interview with Luna. If you haven't listened to part 1, I highly recommend it. She is just full of knowledge. Now, again, this was recorded almost a year ago, and the pandemic was kind of in really full swing. But since that time, I have had the opportunity to travel overseas. And one of the places that I went this summer was Paris. Now, I've been to Paris before, but I did not eat escargot or snails the last time I was there. And I was determined this time to try it. I didn't try it last time, not out of like discomfort, but purely out of, we just didn't end up making it a priority to try them. So I tried them this time, and I can tell you, oh my gosh, eating snails in France was life changing. The escargot there was fantastic. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the escargot and the escargot eating experience. So food is something that is really important to a lot of people, not only culturally, but religiously. It's usually dictated by what has been provided around you or what's been provided as you were growing up. There are a lot of people who love one thing, whereas when someone comes to visit it from somewhere else, they do not love it. And a great example of this is Marmite or Vegemite. So in England, historically in the UK, it's Marmite, and it's slightly different but very similar in Australia called Vegemite. And it's basically like a yeast paste. It is something that I have tried. It is not something I enjoy. And now the rule with Marmite is meant to be you either love it or you hate it, according to their advertising. But the bigger thing here is that culturally and traditionally, a lot of UK people who grow up there trying it, eating it, and so they're very comfortable with it. Same thing with Australia. The US, we have peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and jam, depending on how you look at jelly. Some people think of jelly as what we would call jello in the US, whereas we're meaning jelly like jam, for those of you who use that term to describe the fruit based substance that goes on your toast, maybe. But Americans typically, again, this is a generalization. Not every American likes peanut butter and jelly, but as a general rule, it is a very nostalgic food for us. We grow up eating it as children. And so putting peanut butter with jelly or jam on bread is just something that you do. Well, um, Steven, my husband, comes over here and he doesn't really like peanut butter. And that's not terribly surprising considering the fact that he did not really grow up eating a lot of peanut butter. Again, peanut butter is a very American thing. We eat a lot of peanut butter in general. Um, whereas he did not grow up eating a ton of peanut butter. And that has been my experience again and again and again in the UK with my friends there. So he comes over here and he's like, peanut butter and jam is gross. The very last night that I worked at a youth cafe when I lived in Guildford, in England, I made an American food night for them, for all the young people that I was leaving and saying goodbye to. And I made peanut butter and jam sandwiches. And they were all like, I thought it was just jam. What is this? It's terrible. So it was quite an experience. But we also see it in religious traditions. You know, we see that different cultures and different religions prepare foods differently. You have food that needs to be halal or food that needs to be kosher, right? These are things that food and culture kind of go together. So when you travel, it's very common to find yourself somewhere trying something that you have maybe never tried or something that is not something that you would eat unless you were maybe overseas. Another great example of this is that in Peru, they eat guinea pig. In the United States, we domesticate guinea pigs for pets. And so a lot of people are like, no, absolutely not, will not eat guinea pig. My hard and fast rule in general regarding food is that if I am in someone's home and they prepare it for me, or if they have taken me out to dinner somewhere and they're having this very important cultural moment with me, but particularly in their home, I will try it and I will eat it because I think that that's a really important way of showing respect for people. But I won't go out of my way necessarily just to eat it while I'm there simply because it's there. One exception to that is escargot, snails. So you can't just go out into just any garden and eat the snails there. Okay, please do not do this. Do not try this at home. Do not try and feed it to your siblings. You should not just go out and eat the snails in your yard. However, escargot are typically a garden snail. They are a certain kind of garden snail, and they are often, because it's such a huge industry there, 5 to 7 million snails eaten every year. They are grown, bred in farms. So just like you have kind of fish farming that happens and things like that, and animal farming, obviously, there are snail farms. Escargot is basically meaning edible snail. There is another French word for non-edible snail. And so the idea here is that you get these very specific special snails for eating. Some of the research that I did, the way that they're prepared. So if you are not someone who enjoys thinking about eating animals, you might want to not listen. But basically, they, for 3 days, are only fed water. And then to purify them, they add flour to their diet for 7 more days. And then they are prepared to be boiled. My guess would be probably similarly to like lobster or crab. They are probably boiled alive. I am one of those people that if I can eat it if I don't like think about it too hard. One little snail that I pulled out in France like really looked like a snail. For the most part, they kind of just curl up. They kind of are just a kind of squidgy kind of meat. They're not really soft and they're not really firm. They're kind of a almost like a clam type consistency, or like a mussel maybe, if you've ever had that kind of shellfish. So they're kind of in between. They're not quite a chicken texture. They're not quite like a goo. They're kind of this meaty meat. But one of them really looked like a little snail and like had his like little eye fronds out. I can't think of what they're called at the moment, but like his little eyeball things. And so it was a little hard because I felt like he was looking at me. But generally speaking, they don't really look like anything. You just scoop them out. They are traditionally made in garlic butter and parsley, so they have kind of a little bit of a slippery green sauce on them. But they are, oh my gosh, if you love garlic butter, you love parsley, honestly, the snails are just a socially appropriate way to get more garlic butter and parsley into your mouth. They are so delicious. It's a little bit like, just eating peanut butter on your celery because you want to eat peanut butter, not because you love celery. You're like trying to mask the flavor of celery. Like that's kind of how it is with snails. The snails themselves don't really seem to have very much of a flavor, but they are this delicious little palate for garlic butter and parsley. So that was my experience eating escargot in France. It was really fun. And I basically, from then on, I tried them the first night we were there. We were there for 4 days. I think I ate escargot 6 times while we were there in 4 days. I was like, give me all the snails. So I definitely recommend trying it while you're there, especially if you're someone who loves garlic butter, parsley, anything like that, or just to have a cultural experience and try something new. So I hope you enjoyed this episode with Luna and me, Shae Pepper, the traveling teach. We'll see you again soon for another episode.
I'm Shae Pepper, the traveling teach. At the time of this recording, I am on a 5-year, 50-state road trip around the US, although with COVID, it's going to end up being 6 or 7 years. Darn you, COVID. But I travel full time with my husband, Steven, and our dog, Truffles. I'm a professional youth worker and online educator. I'm passionate about learning on location and want to bring that experience to as many young people as possible through my virtual field trips. To learn more about my travels and online classes, go to thetravelingteach.com. To follow Truffles' travels, our trip from her perspective, which I am sure is infinitely more interesting to most of you than I am, go to @TrufflesTravelsUS on Instagram. To be a guest, tween, or teen on the podcast, just reach out at thetravelingteach.com/contact. This has been an episode of For Traveling Teens, a podcast for teens and tweens who love travel, whether they're actively traveling or just dreaming.